Genesis chapter 18 begins with Abraham's sixth meeting with God. God was definitely less shy back then. If it was God, of course. This someone has done and will do nothing to prove to Abraham that he is the creator of the universe. Sticking with the narrative, in Genesis 17 God had told Abraham that his 90-year-old wife Sarah would conceive the next year. Genesis 18 then is within a few weeks of the previous visit, as Sarah is yet to fall pregnant. This time God does not appear on his own. Abraham is sat in his tent when three men approach. The three men, as we will discover, are in fact God and two angels. But Abraham does not initially have any inkling of this and proceeds to treat them with the hospitality due to any three strangers. If you doubt this fact, then let me quote from The Giant Cities of Bashan and Syria's Holy Places, 1882. Many strange and interesting traits of Arab life and law came under our notice. Whenever our path led us near an encampment, as was frequently the case, we always found some active sheikh or venerable patriarch sitting in his tent door, and as soon as we were within hail, we heard the earnest words of welcome and invitation which the Old Testament scriptures had rendered long ago familiar to us. Stay, my lord, stay. Pass not on till thou hast eaten bread, and rested under the servant's tent. Alight and remain until thy servant kills a kid and prepares a feast. Again and again were these invitations given and urged in such a way that we found it impossible to resist them. In fact, our progress was seriously delayed by this truly patriarchal hospitality. So Abraham tells Sarah to bake some bread, and he chooses a calf for the feast. God and the angels have no problem sitting and twiddling their thumbs for the lengthy time it takes before their food arrives. We can be clear here that there is no idea of Abraham being aware of God's presence. Abraham initially feeds and chats with these three men with no indication that there is anything unusual about them. Now, in Exodus 33:20, God will tell Moses, "Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live." And God will go on to ensure that Moses only ever sees his backside. Which is odd. The face which God decides to manifest in front of Moses is completely within his control. Why would he choose one that is lethal? Why tell Moses he can kill with a glance, whilst here there is no suggestion that God is concealing his face from Abraham? So, though no man can see God and live, he will in fact sit for a couple of hours in Abraham's backyard, chewing the fat, and eventually chewing the fatted calf. This is also only the second, possibly third, if the sons of God in Genesis 6 refers to angels, as likely they do, time in the Bible that angels are specifically detailed. So let us consider angels for a moment. Why does an omnipresent and omnipotent God, who can, with a mere thought, though thought suggests a change of mind state which precludes omniscience, but if with a thought he can create an entire galaxy at the other end of the universe, why does he have any need of henchmen, or hench angels? The apologist will tell you that God needs angels no more than he needs humans, and that he created all of us only out of his unlimited goodness, so that we could share in his glory. This also suggests that he made a decision to create angels and us, i.e. he changed his mind again. But let's press on. The angels are of course male. Angels are always male. Does that mean that all of the angels in heaven are male? Now, if the sons of God in Genesis 6 are indeed angels, as seems most likely, the sons of God who made free with the daughters of men, then it would appear that the angels are not only male, but also anatomically correct. Why would God need anatomically correct angels? If God created all of the angels with a click of his fingers, why did he create them with the ability to copulate, but not create any female angels for them to copulate with? Of course, in his omniscience, he would have known that his anatomically correct angels would get anatomical with human women before he even created them. So man was created in God's likeness and image. The angels would appear to have been also, and God is always he in the Bible. Does that mean God has a penis? Is there possibly a Mrs. God somewhere we have yet to get notice of? Now, the idea of gods and angels wandering around on earth in human form is very much an Old Testament idea, and not something any but the wackiest of Christians would suggest occurs today. So it would appear that whilst God simply could not resist visiting the factory floor at every opportunity, 2,000 years ago he decided a hands-off approach was a better idea for some reason, and he hasn't appeared since. Whilst it might be hard for many of us to believe that God's ever roamed amongst us, our primitive forebears had no such problem. And by primitive, I do not necessarily mean ancient. The most well-documented primitive cosmogony that I have come across is that of the southern Madang district on the north coast of Papua New Guinea. This area was not visited by Europeans until 1871, which means that later anthropological studies were able to reconstruct primitive beliefs without many generations of European interaction to taint the superstitious soup. The best known of these studies is the simply excellent 1964 book Road Belong Cargo by Peter Lawrence. In it we see that the Madang villagers of 50 years ago had no problem conceiving that their gods and ancestors, and the Christian God and Jesus whom they'd been introduced to, shared their physical realm, communicating with them through dreams and visions, and reacting to prayers and sacrifice. I cannot recommend the book highly enough, as it provides a very readable roadmap of how the primitive superstitions, when combined with simplistic Christian teaching and the villagers' growing awareness of the material gulf between themselves and their European overlords, led to a succession of cargo cults. The Christian missions in New Guinea used Pidgin English to spread the gospel, and Pidgin's very limited vocabulary allowed for considerable ambiguity in how the Christian message was received and interpreted by the locals. The ability of these very intelligent but poorly educated and heavily indoctrinated Madang natives to generate an utterly bizarre worldview is, I think, best expressed by the fact that the intellectual cream of the natives, chosen to work as go-betweens and having served alongside Allied forces during World War II, with experience of flying, ocean travel, and having visited Brisbane and Sydney, could come to the conclusion that cargo, i.e. all the material goods which Europeans enjoyed, was created by God Jesus in heaven, which was located above Sydney and connected to Sydney by a ladder. Rome, the centre of the Catholic Church, was in fact the Queensland Museum in Brisbane, and was also connected by ladder to heaven. Jesus was possibly being held captive in heaven, and only the strict observance of specific rituals would ensure his release and the opening of the road to the cargo. These facts were of course confirmed to the villagers by direct communication with God, Jesus, and their own ancestors and gods. Just 60 years ago, many of the Madang people believed these things as fact and acted day to day in ways which they determined would give them access to the cargo. I hope the aside provides illustration that a primitive, unscientific people trying to come to terms with their lot in life can easily sustain a belief that the supernatural is in fact a normal part of their natural world, to be interacted with each and every day. Next time you cross your fingers, knock on wood, wish someone good luck, or indulge in any other form of apotropaic magic, you might consider how far that is removed from the actions of the Madang villagers or Old Testament beliefs. Back to Genesis. After the hungry God and two angels have eaten their fill, the three strangers ask after Sarah. The strangers asking after his wife by name, something which was certainly not the polite custom of the culture, is what would have alerted Abraham, in the context of the story, to the fact that these were no ordinary strangers. The three ask after Sarah, as if they did not know precisely where she was, and the one now repeats what he had told Abraham in chapter 17, that he will return in a year and get Sarah pregnant. Genesis 18:11. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. This makes it clear that Sarah was not benefiting from some divine and miraculous life preservation. She was old and well stricken with age, which makes it patently absurd that a couple of pages ago the Egyptians beheld the woman that she was very fair, and more absurd that in 2 chapters' time Abimelech will get the hots for this old and well stricken in age Sarah and suffer God's wrath as a result. We all know what "and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women" means. Sarah was no longer ovulating. She'd run out of eggs. Basic biology would suggest that any future pregnancy is now impossible, but basic biology would also suggest that tying a goat up against a stripy stick would not induce it to give birth to stripy kids. So what does basic biology know? Sarah is listening in whilst she waits for the bread to rise, and laughs at the suggestion that she is about to get pregnant. "After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" This comment suggests that it's not only the bread which Sarah has been waiting to see rise. God dismisses Sarah's skepticism and repeats once again that he will return at the appointed time and get her pregnant. Apparently this is not something he can do remotely. God and the angels then rise and look towards Sodom, and God says to the angels, "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do?" Is God asking the angels for advice? More importantly, if this conversation was solely between God and the angels, who was it that wrote it down for the biblical record? In the event, God decides to tell Abraham, "Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know." As we are often told, we must take the Bible to be literally true, and so the omniscient God has to go down to Sodom and Gomorrah to find out what is happening there, just as he did at Babel. Of course, as we all know, he doesn't go, but instead sends his two angels. Abraham, twigging that the angels are about to get biblical on Sodom and Gomorrah, tries to reason with God and asks whether the righteous should perish with the wicked. Abraham asks God, will he spare the cities of the plain if just 50 righteous people could be found there? He then haggles God down to 10. God's reaction tells him that in all the towns on the plain there are not even 10 people worth saving. He could not find even 10 babies on the breast, innocent toddlers or hard-working, God-fearing people amongst all those towns worth saving. So he was going to wipe all these cities off the face of the earth, toddlers, babes and all. Of course, he would leave all of the other unrighteous people of Canaan unscathed, not to mention the heathens in Egypt, Babylon, Kadesh, where Abraham will soon visit, and elsewhere. But he's only one God, and he has to start somewhere. So the two angels arrive at Sodom, where they are met by Lot, who insists that they spend the night with him. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. That's right, all of the men of Sodom were apparently predatory homosexuals. So perhaps I was incorrect earlier, and there were no women, babes or children in the city. Though it begs the question, if all of the men were decadent, rampant homosexuals without morals, why would they waste their effort on strangers when you couldn't swing a stick in town without striking a receptive, promiscuous, like-minded individual? And we know that they were only interested in men because when Lot offers his two engaged but virgin daughters up to the mob in place of the angels, they dismiss his offer out of hand. And then the mob, remembering that Lot is a newcomer to town, let him know that his arse is quite literally on the line as well. The angels now have had enough entertainment and sprinkle the crowd with fairy dust to confuse their minds and make them blind, after pulling Lot indoors. The angels now tell Lot to collect his family together, and Lot goes out to tell the two men who were betrothed to his daughters that it's time to leave. Perhaps all the men of Sodom did not include these two, and perhaps they had somehow avoided hearing about the extraordinary events which had resulted in all the men of the city flash mobbing a house and being struck blind and mad as a result. Or just perhaps they had been part of the mob and decided that their idea of a decent father-in-law was not one who would feed his virgin daughters to a baying mob. Whatever their reason, they snubbed Lot's advice. So the angels found only Lot, his wife, and two daughters worth saving, and led them from the city. Lot's wife looks back and is instantly smited for her sin, which suggests the sin threshold God had set for Sodom and Gomorrah was not very high, and possibly explains why he could not find 50 who exceeded that threshold to save for Abraham. Lot and his daughters do not appear trifled by the erasure of wife and mother from their lives, and do not even mention the event in passing. The angels then tell Lot to run for the hills, because all the cities of the plain are about to be consumed. But Lot is wary of the hills, and asks the angels if they cannot spare the city of Zoar instead. And so the angels decide, without changing their minds of course, to spare Zoar and Lot and his daughters escape there. So we have God deciding that all the cities of the plain must be destroyed. He cannot find even 50 people worth saving, but then he spares an entire city at Lot's request. Lot then decides that the mountains which he feared to run to previously are now safer than a city which God's angels have told him he will be safe in, and he belatedly runs to the hills. Lot's daughters then come to the utterly absurd conclusion that their father is the only man left on earth. Though they have just been in a city full of men, are fully aware that only the cities of the plain have been destroyed, and know full well that their father's righteous uncle Abraham, grand sheikh of the desert, with an entire tribe of kissing cousins, is less than a day's walk away. Having inconceivably ignored these very obvious facts, they find amongst the few precious and essential items grabbed from their stricken house in their panicked escape a copious supply of alcohol, and the rest, as they say, is biology. According to Genesis, the offspring of the daughter's highly unlikely dalliance with Dad were the eponymous progenitors of the Moabites and Ammonites. This is a device used throughout the Bible to explain how other peoples, enemies but obviously related by language and culture, are descended from the black sheep of the family. And Lot, having served his single purpose in explaining future enmity, will make no further appearance in the Genesis story.